One of the most fascinating and eerie locations in St. John's, Newfoundland, is the Newman Wine Vault, now a provincial historic site and a museum open to the public. During its heyday in the late 19th century, two employees decided to mark the end of a long day with a few glasses of Newman's famous port, which was strictly forbidden. They had found an unmarked barrel, and assuming it would not be as easily missed, began to pry it open. The moment they did, an unearthly moaning began to echo through the tunnels of the wine vault. The two convinced themselves it was the wind. They began to share their first glass of port, but the moaning continued. They decided to investigate, concerned that there could be someone else in the wine vault that might report their impromptu celebration. They searched the catacombs, but found they were in fact all alone. They decided it was safe to return to their barrel of port. One drink had turned into 5, and they were beginning to feel the effects. Reaching in for yet another glassful, they discovered a large obstruction in the barrel. As they shook the cask, the strange moaning once again echoed through the wine vault. One of the men reached into the barrel to remove the blockage. Apparently, one of Newman's employees had died aboard a ship en route from England to Newfoundland, and during the voyage, his body had been preserved in an unmarked barrel of Newman's port.
For more than a century, the Newman Wine Vault in St. John's, Newfoundland, has been the birthplace of many ghostly legends. Some of these stories are frightening, and others are simply bizarre. Either way, the wine vaults with their dark catacombs and musty barrels are a natural place for tales of the supernatural.
Newfoundland certainly has a great tradition of folklore and a long, long history of ghost stories and folk beliefs and superstitions. The Newmans certainly are a fairly well-known family in the history of Newfoundland, and they were a company that seemed to attract a lot of folklore. There's a lot of different stories that became attached to the Newman family over the years, such as bodies in barrels and all sorts of strange happenings.
The Newman Wine Vault's first recorded sighting of a ghost occurred in the late 19th century. In a rarely used area of the vault, an employee was terrified by the vision of a dark-skinned woman. She stared at him with a forlorn expression. As she slowly approached him, she revealed her shackled hands. The employee ran to Mr. Newman, who decided to investigate the strange apparition. He entered the unused part of the wine vault and discovered a room full of long-forgotten cargo pulled from an old freighter run. In a musty barrel, he uncovered an intricately carved wooden box filled with bones. On closer inspection, they realized the bones were human. There was a bundle of fine red silk from the West Indies. Beneath the silk lay a pair of shackles, the kind used on slave ships. But most horrifying of all was a human skull. Newman gathered the ghoulish remains to arrange a proper burial for this forgotten soul. Clearly, one of the charter ships used by Newman's company had been supplementing their income by trafficking in slaves. The spirit of the shackled woman was no longer seen walking the halls of the wine vault, and perhaps being given a proper burial finally allowed her to find peace. She did, however, make one final appearance, not in reality, but in one of Newman's dreams. He dreamt of walking through the wine vault and encountering this mysterious woman. She beckoned him closer, and though her lips never moved, he could clearly hear her voice in his mind. She warned him of trouble that would befall a ship and its cargo of port. The cargo had been sent out uninsured, and its loss would bankrupt Newman. She left him alone and shaken. The moment Newman awoke, he insured his cargo. The vessel in question never did reach its destination. It was believed to have sunk en route to England. The spirit that Newman helped to find her peace may have returned the favor by saving the Newman Wine Company. Another strange tale concerned a ship carrying molasses, which mysteriously caught fire and ran aground in St. John's. The cargo was offloaded into a warehouse, which also inexplicably burnt to the ground. Rumors began to circulate that the shipment was cursed, and Newman decided to take his portion of the cargo and have it thrown into the bay. As the barrels were being removed from the vault, Newman noticed that a small cask was partially opened. The barrel was not filled with molasses. Inside were the ancient mummified remains of an infant. Newman carefully removed the tiny body from the barrel. He was unsure if the child had been murdered or if this was some treasured artifact stolen from the West Indies or Africa. He wrapped up the body and made arrangements with a local church for a proper burial, after which the strange occurrences surrounding the shipment ceased and there were no more fires. But there have always been unexplainable events at the Newman wine vaults. Though some tales about Newfoundland's Newman wine vault may be urban legends, documented history proves that others are based in fact. Whatever the truth may be, these eerie stories of ghosts and misplaced corpses are perfect for late-night retelling over a glass of port. This story of mystery and intrigue began on a seemingly normal day in May 1956. In a typical home, on a quiet street, a young couple prepared to leave for vacation. Alan and Margaret Campbell were off to their cabin on Trout Lake near North Bay, Ontario. North Bay's stunning countryside is dotted with bountiful lakes. This area is well known for its fishing and other outdoor activities.
Just 4 hours north of Toronto, North Bay has some of the most splendid beaches and well-stocked lakes in all of Ontario. However, North Bay has more to offer, a mystery. Our mystery remains unsolved to this very day.
Like the Campbells, the marvelous beaches enticed many other families to make Trout Lake their yearly vacationing spot. During its peak season, the beaches are packed with vacationers, many of whom live in cottages right by the lake. But Alan and Margaret chose a more isolated location for their cabin. Based on police reports and testimonials of the Campbells' neighbors, it was surmised that they had a simple day planned, a chance to escape the hectic routine of everyday life and relax on the beach near the cool waters of the lake. The couple enjoyed coming to their cabin. It was always therapeutic. They had purchased this cabin shortly after their wedding, and it had become their sanctuary. Alan sat in his chair by the water and basked in the warm sun. Margaret brought him a cold glass of water, and the two chatted for a while, discussing, among other things, dinner plans. Then she went back to the cabin, leaving Alan to relax on his own.
At one time, this was the residence of the Campbell family, the Campbells who disappeared mysteriously in May of 1956 from their cottage on Trout Lake. The day went quite without incident. The Campbells packed up early in the morning, sent one of their daughters off to school. 8:30 in the morning, they left this residence and were never seen again. What's interesting and unusual about this case is that the Campbells literally disappeared without a trace. The Ministry of Natural Resources and all sorts of different departments scoured the entire shoreline of Trout Lake, about 50 miles of it, all told. Not a trace of them was found. But in over approximately the 47 years since their disappearance, not a single clue has turned up.
Once they had decided on their menu, Alan prepared the barbecue. Inside, Margaret made other provisions. The day was going exactly as planned, stress-free and relaxing. The couple decided that their meal should be simple too, making sure it required very little preparation. After all, the two were alone on vacation. There was no need for extravagance. The table was set, and the young couple sat down to enjoy their much-anticipated dinner. But this would be the last time anyone would ever see or hear from the Campbells again. A concerned neighbor called the police. When officers of the North Bay Police Department arrived, they found the scene exactly as it was left. Hamburgers burnt on the grill, and the rest of the dinner still sitting untouched on the table. Aside from being extremely peculiar, the scene revealed little to the investigators. An interview with the helpful neighbor gave the police no new information. The neighbor and the two police officers retraced Alan and Margaret's steps before their disappearance, but it was to no avail. There was simply no explanation, not a hint of evidence that could provide answers about what had happened to the Campbell family. The North Bay community was dumbfounded. How could these people have simply disappeared without a trace? Alan and Margaret's boat was later found to be missing. Based only on this fact, one theory suggests that Margaret and Alan Campbell boarded their small boat and motored out into the lake. Search parties were sent out, but invariably returned unsuccessful in their attempts to find Alan and Margaret's bodies. The Campbells had simply vanished. 40 years have passed, and the case remains open and unsolved by North Bay police. To this day, not a shred of evidence has been uncovered to explain the mysterious disappearance of Alan and Margaret Campbell. In 1915, a woman was walking along a country road on the outskirts of Wilno, Ontario. As she passed an abandoned farmhouse, she thought she noticed something moving in the window. As she neared, she could make out the figure of a young girl staring out of the window. Curiously, she approached the home, hoping to get a closer look. The young girl turned, glaring lifelessly at the woman, her eyes ghostly and unnatural. Terrified, the woman ran from the house, and few have entered since.
Every town with a long history has its own ghost stories, and the village of Wilno, Ontario is no exception. The sad story of young Stefania and her father dates back to the turn of the century. But time is not a factor to spirits, and the echoes from this tale continue to be felt today.
In 1910, a young girl named Stefania lived in the Polish settlement of Wilno, Ontario. She tended to the family farm with her widowed father. As she grew older, she developed into a beautiful woman, and the young men of the village began to flock to her. Her protective father did not approve of the local boys. He had higher expectations for his daughter. As Stefania reached her late teens, strange events began to take place around her. Sometimes, the entire house would shake. Terrified, Stefania began sleeping surrounded by religious artifacts for protection. But a strange force seemed to envelop her anyways. The religious objects would vanish, and a mysterious dark figure would come for her as she slept. The entity would attack her, pulling at her bedsheets as if trying to lay claim to her. After one such attack, a woman from the village examined her and found bruises on her arms and neck as if she had been beaten. This woman and many others in the village were convinced an evil spirit was trying to possess Stefania. This would be terrifying for anyone, but especially an innocent young girl. The pious and superstitious people of the village believed that Stefania and her father brought this evil upon themselves through either a lack of faith or some shameful sin against God. The two soon found themselves shunned by the fearful townsfolk who were once their friends. Terror and exhaustion took its toll on Stefania, and one day she collapsed. Her father found her near dead. Cut off from the other villagers, he tried to care for her on his own. He read her passages from the Bible, but instead of bringing her comfort, the scriptures seemed to enrage her. She screamed at him in a language he could not understand, in a voice that was not her own. Only when he stopped reading would she fall back to sleep. In spite of her weakened condition, Stefania began sleepwalking. She often wandered aimlessly through the town, and those who encountered her were horrified by what they saw. The evil eye was considered irrefutable evidence of demonic possession. Stefania's father struggled to come to grips with what was happening. One day, she began to cry out. He ran to her, and she spoke to him in her own voice, telling her father of her love for him. A short time later, she died. The people of the village seemed relieved, believing that Stefania's death would also mean the death of the demonic force that possessed her soul. The villagers refused to allow Stefania to be buried on consecrated ground unless her body was laid out for several days, hoping that this would cleanse her and drive away the evil she carried inside her. Her father had no choice but to obey their wishes, and he began a lonely vigil, awaiting the day he could bury Stefania beside her mother. As he fell asleep next to his beloved daughter, something incredible occurred. He awoke to find Stefania's body had vanished. Stefania's father grabbed a lantern and spent the entire night searching for his daughter. His pleas for help were ignored by the villagers, and finally he made his way to the cemetery. No one knows what he found there, because he never returned. Over 75 years have passed, and many people believe he may still be searching for his lost daughter. Today, legend has it that when a car is parked in the Wilno Cemetery, if the headlights are flashed 3 times and a young woman shouts "Daddy" 3 times, the spirit of Stefania's father will appear holding his lantern. The figure will approach the car and then walk back the way it came. Dozens of people have experienced this strange phenomena. The farm where Stefania and her father lived is now abandoned and rarely mentioned. It is simply called the house where nobody lives. Even today, few dare to venture into the remains of this farmhouse, knowing that though her body was never found, Stefania's tortured and angry spirit still dwells there. The mystery of her disappearance has never been solved. Could Stefania have fallen into a death-like coma, only to awaken and wander blindly into the night? Or did the spirit that wished to possess her finally take Stefania, body and soul? Perhaps a father's love for his daughter never dies, giving him the drive to continue his desperate, endless search for her, long after both parent and child have passed on. When an employee of the restaurant Heritage arrived early to open up, a strange feeling came over her as she got inside. She looked around the room, but saw nothing peculiar. As always, the restaurant was empty. And then, out of nowhere, the apparition of a ghostly woman wearing only a nightgown appeared. The figure seemed to be staring intensely into the employee's eyes. While the origins of this spirit are uncertain, those who have encountered her wandering around the building swear to her existence.
A building's history impacts greatly on its present-day activities. Events which happened within its walls several years ago may still play a large role in a building's paranormal anomalies. Such is the case with the restaurant Heritage in Cumberland, Ontario.
Many staff members of Restaurant Heritage frequently sense unseen presences in the building, giving them the distinct feeling that they are not alone. Another young employee watched as the door to the kitchen mysteriously swung open by itself. Slowly and reluctantly, she entered the room. The door slammed shut, leaving the woman startled and terrified. She quickly ran out of the kitchen. Seeking sanctuary in the dining room, she felt safe, but only for a moment. As the ghost began walking towards her, the young woman froze with fear. She shut her eyes and braced herself. And when she finally looked around again, the spirit had vanished. The woman quickly left the building, never looking back.
Yeah, in this house, there's I wouldn't say, is it haunted? Not, I wouldn't say maybe haunted, but there's a lot of people living in this house. Not counting the guests, but meaning there's a lot of spirits in this place. 120 years old, what can the house say? Nobody knows. Of course, a few occasions where you can feel when somebody's staring at you. And especially on the third floor, you will feel somebody staring at you. And you look around and there's nobody there. So.
The staff have experienced several unusual ghostly encounters within the restaurant. The bartender was cleaning up his area, prepping it for a shift change, when he noticed something odd about the bar. The glasses he had laid out previously had all been turned over. Even more astonishing was the sight of a woman dressed only in a nightgown walking past him. The bartender finished his duties and left the restaurant, shaken. The beauty of this century-old building in Cumberland, Ontario, hides its mysterious past. Today, it is the site of an elegant restaurant. However, within its walls stirs the restless spirit of an unknown soul. Many have claimed to see the apparition of this woman. To date, she has only allowed us to know of her existence and little else. Perhaps over time, more will be revealed. The manager at Chez Briand's restaurant in St. John's, Newfoundland, was preparing to open for the day when he heard strange noises coming from the back dining room. He entered to find a ghostly scene playing out in front of him. What looked like a shrouded body was laid out on a table, with a mysterious, grim-faced man slowly approaching it. The strange figure seemed far more interested in the body beneath the shroud than with the curious young manager. As the man pulled back the cover, the face of a beautiful woman was revealed. The ghostly man stared at the manager coldly, as if he were intruding on a private moment. Suddenly, the woman's eyes opened, and a deafening sound filled the air. Seconds later, the room returned to normal, and the now shaken manager knew he had encountered the spirits of Chez Briand.
St. John's, Newfoundland's Chez Briand restaurant is recognized for its five-star cuisine. But this building has a darker past, having been everything from a mortuary to a house of ill repute. With this sort of history, it should not come as a surprise that the building houses more than a few spirits.
This building has a long history. Heard several stories of ghosts. My name is Brian Abbott. I'm the owner and operator of my restaurant here, Chez Briand. We've been here for 3 years now. We've had one of our floor staff that actually, when she was going down over the stairs, on the second step, a smoky figure sort of went through her. And it was an eerie feeling for her that night, and she still talks about it today.
The spirits that haunt the Chez Briand restaurant have one unique quality. They seem to have no fear of the living. One waitress found herself face to face with the same grim-faced man in the back dining room. He began to approach her. She was terrified and curious at the same time, having heard other people's tales of ghostly encounters. The man continued to stare at her with ice-cold eyes. She would not be the last to encounter this mysterious gentleman. The somber man is not alone. There is also another spirit that has been seen in the dining rooms at Chez Briand. For years, staff members have reported seeing a beautiful woman dressed in black wandering through the dining rooms, only to vanish into thin air.
In the late 60s to the 90s, it became a bed and breakfast restaurant and a bar. It was also a place for, well known for late night parties, somewhat of a local brothel.
The building's past as an alleged brothel might explain the mysterious and flirtatious woman in black who appears either before the restaurant opens or after closing. On one occasion, she casually seated herself and beckoned to the manager. Unsure of what to make of this woman or how to react, he approached her. She reached out and took his hand. And suddenly, something terrifying happened. It was as if a giant electrical charge had gone through his body, and in an instant he was alone again, with only memories of this mysterious woman. Another explanation for the hauntings at Chebrillon may be the building's history as a funeral home. This would account for the sightings of the mysterious, somber man that many believe was once the undertaker, still keeping watch over his building. But perhaps the most disturbing images of all are of the many cadavers laid out as if being prepared for embalming by the cold, lifeless hand of the undertaker. The ghosts of Chebrillon in Newfoundland were there long before the restaurant opened, and the new owners have accepted them as part of life. In this very haunted city, having a spirit or two in a building is simply part of everyday business. On Ile Saint-Hélène, just minutes from downtown Montreal, sits Fort Stewart, once a military outpost, now a museum where live historical reenactments are performed daily. But staff and visitors have also witnessed some unexplained occurrences with the mysterious spirits that seem to exist within the fort's walls. One woman had a chilling encounter. As the spirit passed through her body, she felt as if her blood had momentarily turned to ice. She was terrified.
Many people believe that spirits linger in the material world for different reasons. For some, an undying or unrequited love causes their earthly connection, and for others, an untimely death or great trauma can keep them trapped here. At Fort Stewart on Ile Saint-Hélène in Montreal, many such spirits walk among the living, each bound by their own tragic chains.
Fort Stewart was first built in the early 1800s. The history of the fort has been gloomy. Inside the fort itself, apparently Stewart, who was the founder of the fort, is also one of the roaming spirits, because a lot of the people who have been working there for years, especially the night watchman, has reported of seeing numerous apparitions of Stewart himself.
The museum curators and staff have spotted who they believe to be Mr. Stewart himself, sometimes in a human-like form, and other times as a glowing figure. The spirit of Mr. Stewart has also been seen around the exhibits, as if he is keeping an eye on the museum and its displays. He had devoted his entire life to this museum, and it is not surprising that in death he is still protecting it. Over the years, the soldiers and militia stationed here were only called into action once, but that one time was so tragic and horrible that its memory may hang over Fort Stewart forever.
An officer by the name of Carleton sent 800 militia off the shore to attack the American soldiers, who were unfortunately elite shooters, waiting for them on the South Shore. They never made it off the shore, actually. They all died because the American elite started shooting at them right away. This could be one of the reasons why the fort itself is haunted.
Many have reported seeing a very strange apparition in the old artillery room. That of a man in uniform examining the weapons as if preparing for battle. Could this be the spirit of one of the 800 men who died in Carleton's disastrous military expedition? This phenomenon is not confined to the artillery room. Sometimes the man is seen on the grounds. Witnesses have reported him near the wall, staring out at old Montreal, perhaps longing for the place that was once his home. Whether as the military camp for soldiers or the wonderful museum of its namesake, Fort Stewart has its own way of bringing history home for residents both past and present.